Hi fellas, time for a new build. As you can see in front of me, I've got Tamiya's 148 Mustang. So with this build, I'm going to use some aftermarket decals of the Grim Reaper as flown by Colonel Lowell K. Bruland. I'll also be using some aftermarket sets, cockpit set, as you can see in front of you. Some exhaust stubs, hollowed out. A new propeller and blades. Some new wheels and some of the cannons. So let's take a look at this aftermarket cockpit set. As you can see, it's far superior to the plastic. We've got a lot of external extra details on both side walls. Also a lot more detailed dashboard and some photo etch for the dials, along with a clear sheet for the actual dials themselves and some texture on the seat. So first things first, we need to do some surgery to the kick part. Removing the actual, oil cooler frame to be able to stick it to the resin parts. First I cut it off, and then I will use some knives, some files, some sanding sticks to get it all flush, ready in prep for the actual gluing to the resin part. Next up, with some 180 grit sandpaper, some water, and while wearing a really heavy duty respirator, it's time to get rid of the casting block off the bottom of the cockpit. And to this, it's just a case of sanding it until it's gone. There we are, that should near enough do it. Happy days. Time to remove some of the casting blocks from the resin. For this, I'm going to use a Tamiya scriber, just because it's a nice sharp blade. Other things can be used, like the thin razor saws, or knives, and what have you. Just on this part, I'm just going to use this. The side walls I will be keeping on the casting blocks to help paint. Same with the seat and other parts, just so I've got something to grab hold of it. Right, it's time to add some wood effect to this floor of this cockpit. So for this, I am just going to use a piece of wooden effect sticky back plastic. First off, I'm just going to trace around where the control stick goes on some Tamiya tape, as you can see in front of you, and then that's going to get transferred over onto the actual sticky back plastic. That's going to get cut out, and then it's just going to be put in place and use the stickiness of it to keep it in place. So before I can start bending these harnesses all over the place, I just need to anneal it. So annealing it makes the metal softer, so it's easier to bend, they'll bend better and all that sort of stuff. So I'm just using a candle and just a quick flash over all parts. So once the harnesses are all annealed, it's time to bend them to shape. So what I'm doing here, I'm just using my pliers and my tweezers just to get them into rough shape. I'm not going to glue them at this point because I want to paint them separate. So I'm just, as I say, just bending them. So first with the back harness. And then with the little side lap harnesses. So again, exactly the same principle, just bending it to fit. So after priming in black, I'm going to start painting the cockpit, and we're using Mr. Hobby Colour, what was that, 58, just for dancing all over it. First off, just get a general coat, and then starting with the centre of the panels, just so we get a broken, not uniform coverage. So once the main cockpit covers on, I'm going to light some panels, and to do this I just add a few drops of white and I hit just the centre of the panels with a really low air pressure, about 11 or 12 psi. I'm just lightening the panels as it says on the tin. So next up I'm chipping off the paint that went on the wooden floor. All I'm doing is using a stiff bussel brush and just scraping it off. Nothing more than that, nothing special at all. Hopefully it'll give an impression of a wooden floor. So with the aid of this book that I got from the works, I'm going to detail up the cockpit, you know, some instrument panels and all that sort of stuff. Using different coloured gel pens, I'm going to highlight some areas with the white and then going over the black, yellows and the reds. And if I make a mistake, all I'm going to do with a wet Q-tip or a cotton bud is just wipe it off and go again. And then once the white's been put on, we move on to the different colours. First red, and then eventually I'll go over again with yellow. The white's there just as a background to help the colours stand out a bit more. Next up, with a sponge damp in some water and some metallic and non-metallic watercolours, I'm going to start picking out some more details, adding scratches, all that sort of stuff, just to bring the cockpit a bit more to life. Now it's time to add a oil wash, and for this I'm going to use just some simple lighter fluid and some simple artist oils. As you can see, around one side I've already dotted them brown, so all I'm doing is using this brown I think it's burnt umber for just have some dirt and mud and that sort of stuff. Now with a soft tip brush and again some of the light fluid, I'm just going to blend all that in there, making sure I get most of it off, and just going to blend it all in by real stippling effect. Right, well I'm going to go do the same again, but this time with black, and this is just to highlight all the shadows more than anything else. So very sparingly, I'm going to dot it all over the place, and once this will dry, I'm going to just remove moisture, so this will just stick in the crevices and all the rivets and all that sort of stuff, just to give that the shadow type effect. Again, once done, I'll remove it with a damp brush with some lighter fluid on it. Once done, I'm just going to use some pigment to give the impression of some dust on the floor and what have you. Just adding it on with a brush and yeah, just blending it in really. So this bit was quite difficult actually. Well, not difficult, but awkward. The dial parts was glued to the back of the PE part, and then it was added to the aircraft dashboard, which was quite tricky to actually get it in there. But overall, it worked and went in, and it looks okay. Now, once it's all finished, it's time for the scary part, and that's actually cutting the parts out. So you can see the line there. What I'm going to be using for this is the Tamiya P cutter, because it's got a nice sharp blade, got a bit more control. So all I'm doing is just dragging it back, just scoring the resin just to make it a decent cut, and then once that's done, just trimming it up so it's nice and flush. To make the actual cockpit now fit, I need to file, sand, scrape all the insides of the cockpit as well as the actual cockpit itself, just to make sure it all sits nice and flush, nice and tight, but doesn't push the fuselage out to make it more difficult at a later stage. Just using some cheap super glue from the pound shop. Okay, I'm just going to stick one side in, making sure it's in the seated correctly, let that cure, and then I'll get the other side in as well. When they both go in, it's time to then file down the seam lines. Starting off, I just, with a fairly, well, not too aggressive grit, sand it down, smooth it out, and it's a bit like rinse and repeat. Okay, so then we buff it all out and what have you. Once I've done that, I'll give it a look, see how it's going on, some more if needed, and then once that's done, I will get a Sharpie and I will write, mark out along the spine. That entails me to see if there's any other places that need sanding. So you can see just slightly where there's some extra work that's needed, just along that seam line. So I just back to it with my sanders. And let's just have another look. Yep, there we are, seam line all gone. And using some IPA, I'm just going to clean the marker off to make sure it doesn't bleed through the paint later on. Once the sanding is all done, I can actually get on with re-scribing the panel lines, either using a razor saw or a pea cutter or something like that. Carefully rescore those lines, and then we'll be ready for fixing everything else and painting. As you can see, the main construction is near enough all sorted, but it's now time to tackle those wing seam lines, and it's just exactly the same as what I did before. Gradually working down the grits until I get a nice smooth finish, and then reapplying those panel lines. So that's it, fellas, that's part one over and done with. Next up will be the painting part. Bye for now.